Hey everyone, Sycra here, and in this video I'm taking the marker sketches that I did in the last video and I'm bringing them into Photoshop and coloring them somewhat. Not all of them, but some of them. And so the technique I'm using is the same as the one I use in the Udemy cell shading course, so I'm not gonna really go over the technique too much, but basically I isolate the line art and then I use the lasso tool to create a mask and then I color after that. So what's good with using the lasso tool and creating this mask around the characters is it gives me a second try at the silhouette. So I get to refine the silhouette. And this is what I think is important whenever you ink anything or clean up things. It's to not just view it as I'm inking the rough, because if you think of it that way, you tend to just be following what you've already done. But instead, try and think like you've got a second try, and okay, what would you do differently, you know? So I try and think of it that way anyways. And so this is kind of a boring part. And I mentioned I'm not going to do all the characters because I'm not going to do the crescent moon dude. He just, it didn't strike me as someone I really wanted to do. I didn't understand what was going on, so it's like, screw it, I'm not going to do that. But I'm doing the other ones. And man, people were saying it looks like League of Legends characters, and that I was ripping off League of Legends. This is annoying because I've heard this a few times now with characters I've done. One was like that, I did this elf in the snow, and like, that looks like a League of Legends character, and it's frustrating because I haven't played League of Legends and I don't know the characters, but it's just, maybe it's just generic designs, because I feel like these designs are fairly generic. Like the guy right now, it's like, oh, generic samurai dude with big sword. There's a robot dude. There's the chick with the big sword again, and the ogre dude. It's like, these are just common things. So I think in maybe some of my other designs they're more unique, but in these marker ones, nope. So I'm sorry if it looks like League of Legends things or any other thing. It wasn't intentional. In fact, I still don't know what League of Legends things look like too much. And so with this girl with the big sword, I actually see how she's holding one arm to her face. I didn't really catch that when I was doing the color, so I think I just treated it as if it was maybe another shoulder pad on the side or something. So, oh well. And so now I'm going into the more painting mode, and it's all about variation, especially for this guy, because this monster dude it's organic, right? It's a creature, so to me that means a lot of variation, a lot more variation than maybe in the robot dude. But yeah, although I guess I would do variation in the robot as well. I would just use like softer gradients, and with the creature I want to have more obvious different colors. I don't know. I don't know how successful this was, but again, I just want to do it because I think someone else mentioned it, to take the marker sketches and then see what the next step would be. And here I'm putting a ground shadow, because ground shadows are important. It grounds your character. It's like now they are in an environment, not just you know, flat, but fools you into thinking that there is more there than meets the eye. And I'm trying to think if I can explain what's going on in my head when I do these. So for instance, right now I'm doing the blue. And it's like, okay, because the gray was too boring, and I thought, let me add blue. It will make it look somewhat modern. But then knowing where to put the blue is probably the challenge. And I'm using overlay modes to get some of those highlight areas. So a layer set to overlay. Again, it's not really important about what the trick is in how I'm doing it, because I could have done that many different ways. I could have used a color dodge layer, or I could have manually painted so I just lighten certain areas but increase the saturation or decrease the saturation. It's more that you've got the knowledge in your head, and I think that comes from probably studies. Just observing things and seeing how they work. Yeah, getting shadows for everybody, because everybody could use a shadow. And they're grounded. And I changed the samurai guy's sword shape. I think the original sword shape was like behind him, it looks like he has a collar, right? I think that's actually where the blade originally was, but I felt like that made the hilt too long, so I just made that into a collar. And for this, it's tricky about where do I keep the white and where do I keep the black, and I thought, let me add some trim. And trim is so effective at like patterns and trim. So see, I added like stripes on the thing around his waist, and then I added this orange trim, and it's really little things that make big differences and can make things look a lot more complicated when really they might not be. So I think one of the two things is the color variation. It just makes things look like, wow, so much is going on. This is so interesting. And this is why traditional work can often look so much better than digital work when you're comparing the work of maybe beginners. And this is debatable because there's a clean digital look that looks amazing. But in general, it's because with traditional you automatically get all this color variation. If I took some paint and it was blue and there was some paint that's yellow and I mix them and then I paint, well, there's going to be some parts that are a bit more blue, some parts that are a bit more yellow. There's going to be a lot of variation, changes in the texture of the canvas or paper. So when I paint digitally now, I try and keep that in mind and throw in variation, whether it's with overlay layers or with just manually putting in slightly different tones. And the way I do that is put down color, and then on the wheel, the Coloris wheel, I'll shift the hue a little bit, which I'm not doing right now, but I am painting with the opacity jitter on, so if I press lightly, it's less pressure, and so I'm letting there be some variety in things. And it's a balancing act, because if you have too much variety, it's going to look muddy, and if you have too little, it's not going to look good. So how do you keep it from looking very muddy? Because I think that's also a common concern. And one way is the color balance layer I added. So you see, like the current layer I'm on is layer 7, and then underneath that there is a color balance which just brings all the colors into harmony. And basically what it's doing is it's just saying, like, you adjust it so it's like, well, make all the shadows, no matter what color it is, if it's in the shadow, make it a bit more, and then you get to choose, and I tend to make it a bit more red or something like that. And then when you do that to the midtones and the highlights as well, it's just creating a harmony. Like all the colors are like getting closer together. But if I was doing it traditionally, what I would be doing is creating. Well, first of all, there's a lot of desaturated colors, and so with desaturated colors, you can have a lot of variation, and it still sort of works. Like there's the mud color, right? You can look at that creature on the bottom right, and if you look at his skin, there's a lot of muddy, different colors in there. Browns, but also some are more green, some are more blue, some are more purple, some are more orange. Even with this guy, right? Like, look at his skin. There's a lot of different little things. And see, I added like a more greenish color, but then it's desaturated, so it will still work. It's just when you get muddy, it's when you get into the higher saturations, I feel anyway. Or you're going too crazy with temperature. But actually, I think you can get away with a lot of craziness in temperature. I don't know. I'm sorry if this is very technical. Just trying to explain my thought process, and I'm realizing that a lot of this might not make a whole lot of sense to people who are starting out, which is why mileage is so important, because it's one of those things that when you first start doing paintings, there's just way too much stuff to focus on, and then later on you're able to break things down into more manageable chunks and focus on, okay, I'm actually looking at the temperature now, the color changes and things like that. Whereas in the beginning, values are so important, and just the drawing is so difficult. But I do feel that drawing is usually people's problem, because color changes and all this stuff, it's pretty quick to solve. And so far, every time, and I'm sorry if this is you listening, because it used to be me, but every time I've seen someone who says, I can't paint, but I can draw, and I'm good with drawing, and look at their drawing, and no, I've never seen, not once have I seen a guy who claims to be good at drawing and bad at painting, who is actually good at drawing. They might be okay at drawing or pretty good at drawing. But usually when you can draw well, then painting is not that hard. And I don't think I can draw all that well, and yet. But as I get better at drawing, I tend to get better at painting. But as I get better at painting, it doesn't really transfer that I get better at drawing. So anyway, I hope this helps with giving you an idea of how to flesh out your characters. And yeah, thanks for watching.